I was like, oh, good. Okay, it's recording.
Hello, Dr. April Duncan. We are so happy to see you. If people recall, you were here for our Insight series back in August to help our special education teachers and the general education teachers of our Lutheran schools learn more about the social emotional development for children to help impact us in the 2023-24 school year. Now, for those of you who are new, my name is Jackie Smith. I am the Executive Director of LASE Specialized Education, where we provide comprehensive special education services, primarily for Lutheran schools, but we also provide those services to Christian schools. We want to make sure that every child who we work with at LASE Specialized Education reaches their God-given potential. So we welcome you, and we're so excited to have Dr. April Duncan here today to really help parents. We did a survey recently to ask them questions about what would you like to know in regard to that social emotional component that sometimes we at LASE don't address as much as we would like to, because our specialty and expertise is in special education. So we wanted to have you back, and we're so glad to have you. So if you're okay with that, we're just going to dive in, and I'm going to ask you some questions that actually came from a recent parent survey and see what you can help our parents with children who are having some learning issues or some behavioral concerns or some other challenges, so you can give them some tips. So we're just going to dive right in if you're okay with that.
Works for me.
Awesome. Well, first, I'm going to talk a little bit about who you are. So those who did not attend our Insight series know who you are. So Dr. April Duncan, she obtained her bachelor's in arts and science from the University of Missouri, Columbia. Your master's of social work was from St. Louis University, and your doctorate of social work from the University of Southern California. Got a lot of education here, Dr. April. She is the founder of BMH Connect, which is an organization that is focused on Black youth empowerment through the use of play therapy. Dr. April is a racial trauma expert and leader in her field and advocating for the mental health needs of Black children. She's written a book. Her book is called Black Students Matter: Play Therapy Techniques to Address Racial Trauma in Black Students, provides an innovative approach to address mental health issues in Black children through the use of play therapy. You are also an adjunct instructor in the online MSW program at Tulane University, and you have over 10 years of clinical experience and have worked collaboratively with various stakeholders in schools, the juvenile justice system, and the child welfare system to teach the importance of recognizing and addressing trauma in children from all backgrounds. You also serve on the advisory board for the World Association of Sand Therapy Professionals. We are very, very excited to have you. So again, welcome.
Thank
So if
you.
you're okay with it, here we go. We're going to dive in
Did
for
it.
our parents. Here we go. So the first question that we have is, as a parent, can you explain what is considered behavior problems within a school setting?
Yeah, so I think it's important as we answer the questions and talk today that we recognize it's something called adverse childhood events. It's things that happen in a kid's life that can disrupt or delay some developmental things. And so oftentimes we hear just the word trauma. Adverse events can be a multitude of things. It could be being in a bad natural disaster or having a scary medical procedure. So it goes outside of like abuse and neglect. When we say trauma, a lot of times, especially as me being a social worker, caregivers think that we are, then it's like an accusatory type of thing that we, maybe you did something to your kid. So as we talk about then ACEs is what we call adverse childhood events, COVID. As a supervisor, I supervise a lot of people working on their play therapy certification. And I kind of say we have to have this COVID-19 lens of there are some things that COVID disrupted that, as this kind of being a newer thing that we've experienced in our lifetime, we're not quite sure what the long-term effects are. So I can speak as much as I can as an expert in trauma and also making sure that we have a COVID lens on, because as we talk through these things about like what maybe problem behaviors are, it's understanding that things happen in our world that can impact kids. That is important. A lot of times, at least in my experience in working with parents, they take on a lot of the blame of maybe for why behaviors exist. And y'all, there's so many other things that are contributing to it. Just know it's not something just being singular by you that these behaviors are existing. So let's start there. So the question about the problems, I'm always trying to make sure that we're mindful of that we don't, it's not one answer for everything. Each kid is different. So we have two categories of behaviors we call internalizing behaviors and externalizing behaviors. Externalizing behaviors are kids that maybe talk back, or they cry a lot, have tantrums, they may have aggressive behaviors. And then we have internalizing behaviors. These are kids that oftentimes are struggling maybe with some anxiety, or maybe a little bit of depression, or maybe thoughts of harming themselves. And you can't see it on the surface. It maybe looks like them being more withdrawn, or something that we call somatic complaints. So you may notice they get a lot of tummy aches, or their body's always sore, things like that. So the reason I explain that is I always say the externalizing kids are the ones that always are on our radar because we see it, right? They won't listen, they're tantruming. It's really disruptive, not just to the kid's life, but to the caregiver as well,
Yes.
too, right? I can't take them anywhere because they're acting a fool. So those are the ones that we kind of already have a keener eye on. I say I worry about our internalizing babies because you can't see it as much, right? So
Well, they could be daydreaming outside the window.
all of the
Just
daydreaming. Yes.
daydreaming.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And so but at the root of it, trauma, and not all trauma results in like post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, right? But all adverse events leave kind of a mark in us, and every kid reacts to it differently. So when we think about trauma, trauma looks like ADHD, trauma looks like depression, and trauma looks like anxiety. So a lot of times then we're having kids on ADHD medication, we're wondering why it's not working, and it's because it's trauma. It's not what I would say true ADHD. So I'm like trying to make sure I'm like succinctly answering this question as well too, because
Right.
it's,
No, thing about it is I love that you brought up, I call it post-pandemic. It's just my words,
yeah,
because we always are trying to communicate to our educators and our parents that this is in for the long haul. We're seeing issues now. We don't know what the final result is going to be until these kids are way long gone after high school. We
until
got a
they're,
long way to go. We have
yep,
a lot of kids that we see in early childhood who were showing those signs that we were just talking about of depression, anxiety, language delays, speech delays.
yeah,
They were looking at masks.
exactly.
So I
Yeah,
love that
yeah,
you said that and circle back to COVID, because I think that's a really
yeah,
important point. So
yeah.
so if you were looking at behaviors, what are some things in school that you see that we need to look at that a little bit closer?
I would say if I were to give just to answer that very
Yeah.
clearly, I would say behaviors that can harm themselves or others. So aggression towards themselves or others, like self-harming behaviors, headbutting, picking scabs, any type of cutting behaviors or things like that. Um, Harm to others, maybe where they're aggressive or destructive behaviors, that is going to maybe jeopardize the safety of other children and or staff. I would also then include sexualized behaviors. That's a whole other recording in its sense of kind of like what is normal sexual development, and then what is problematic. I think about through some of the cases I've been consulting on with some of my supervisees. It's problematic when it is something that is overt, something that is, it's hard because some of these definitions are subjective, right? Frequent, like what is frequent? But like I've heard of kids that are exposing themselves to other people. That's problematic. When they are trying to touch other people inappropriately, that's problematic. The mid answer I would give you there then, Jackie, is the behavior, if it becomes disruptive. So for example, some kids are just, their personalities, they're just more shy, right? But when they're so shy to the fact of it's like a social anxiety, they're avoiding going in certain places, they're avoiding socializing with other people, that's problematic. But you can have another kid that's shy that still can warm up to people and then be able to engage in that. Same thing then with a child that has hyperactivity, right? If you can redirect them, even though it's a pain, but they can take the redirection, it's not problematic. But if it's that the child is getting kicked out of class or unable to finish their homework and things like that, that's when it becomes an issue. The root of all of it for us as clinicians is the DSM, in the way that we're taught, is when it disrupts functioning. So kids that have nightmares, if they're having so many nightmares that they're unable to sleep well and it's affecting them going to school and their moods, that's when nightmares are a problem. Does that make sense, in the sense of
Yes.
like, it's hard to really, outside of those safety things that can harm others, the middle in between there is, I always
Yes.
tell parents, if you see a change in your child's behavior,
Mhm.
that's what you would want to, whoa, something's up. Because there's, in order for there to be a reaction, there has to be something that caused that, right? So
Correct.
if your child used to be really outgoing and now they're more withdrawn, that can be seen as problematic. If they used to get really good grades and now those grades aren't very well, like any type of change in your child's behavior that is different from what is their baseline, that's what I would label as problematic behavior or concerning behavior that you might want to get checked out.
So I think it's also important about really having, especially with our parents, is to really work in collaboration with your educators, your administrators at your school. So you
Yeah.
guys are coming together as a team to do some deep dives into what the behavior is. Because the
Yeah.
thing that we found is it could be trauma. It could be a language delay. They're
Mhm.
not understanding what you're saying to them. They can't follow a sequence of directions. So
Yeah.
really to do a deep dive into not only the social emotional, but also the cognitive, academic, getting them the evaluation that they need to
Yeah.
succeed. And so I want to go back to the behavior, because I think that we are seeing more of that. We're seeing a
Yeah.
lot of our early childhood kiddos coming in with anxiety at 3.
Yeah. I would be too if I were them.
So from your perspective, do you think that is strictly post-pandemic because
That's
of
one of
where
those
we
things
are?
that's hard. Yeah, I think it's easier with our older kids to be able to be like, wait, okay, like because you had a baseline. When you said 3 years old, I have two friends that have 3-year-old boys that were born during the pandemic, and they're constantly asking me, and I'm like, exactly what we're talking about, Jackie, of I can give you what I know, but just know we don't know, because they were born during a time, like you said, they were isolated. So they weren't exposed to a lot of people. Then when they were exposed to a lot of people, they had masks on. So how was that going to affect language and things like that? There's some preliminary research, but what we call longitudinal research, right? Research where we can work with a set of kids, do some research and follow them through their lifespan. Like you said, we're not going to know this information probably for another 15 years or so.
Okay.
What we're seeing with younger kids, though, are those things of anxiety, attachment issues. Because think about it, they were born in a bubble and they don't know too many things beyond that bubble. So then that's your home base, that's your secure base. And so these kids are going to possibly be less resistant to exploring that home base. Both of my
Mm.
friends' kids, it's so funny. I almost get offended if a kid doesn't like me, because all kids love me. And if kids don't like me, I take it personal. And it's going to be my mission to make sure we're friends by the end of our interactions.
Well, I think adults are good with you too.
Good to know, right? But I also do it at at their pace, right? So with both of they're my nephews. I remember both of my friends trying to make them be like, no, this is your auntie. I'm like, no, I'm a stranger to them. We're going to be best friends, but it's going to take a lot longer.
Yeah.
And the second one, I finally won him over because he loves Spider-Man. So I was finally able to, but it took 3 years for him to get comfortable with me. And he was very much more underneath, just like he only really interacted with mom and grandma and sister. So the younger ones are going to be more difficult because we're all still clunking around trying to figure out what the effects are.
Well, you just brought up something that is really important, and I hadn't thought about it that way. I love when I learn something new today, and
Mhm.
I just did. Is that maybe we need to be a little more patient in building those relationships and that trust with these young, early, especially early childhood,
Yep.
because they need longer because of that being born in a bubble, so to
Mhm.
speak, that you were just talking about. And I
Yeah.
love that because I think that we as educators sometimes are impatient. We come to school, this is required after week 2, this is required after fourth week, 6 weeks, second
Yeah.
quarter, etc. And maybe we need to kind of evaluate
Mhm.
what we're doing in that regard, as far as that building that camaraderie with our students and student to student, peer to peer.
Yeah, and you made me think of something that I think is really important that we highlight as well too. Kids feel anxiety. So, right, we're not surprised that these 3-year-old children have anxiety because um, things are absorbed in utero. So, guarantee our caregivers had some level of anxiety as they were carrying the children. It was a scary, confusing time, right? So, let's 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 talk about trauma in the brain. So when trauma is absorbed in utero, you kind of already have kids that are coming out with their brain already just like firing and already having some kind of disconnections. Again, nothing that we can control. It's just environmental things that happen. But I think it's really important that as caregivers, we can't expect things of our kids that we can't model. So if we can't regulate, if we can't calm ourselves down and model that in those kind of stressful, anxiety-ridden situations, how can we expect that of our kids, right? And, it might be called gentle parenting, it'd be called a lot of things, but I think it's really important that you take some time to learn the best ways for you to regulate and calm down and model that for your kids, but also I always tell caregivers to model your, I don't know if it's a real word, but your humanness, right? That like
Yes.
sometimes I lost it and mommy shouldn't have said that. I just was a little, use our emotional expression. I was frustrated because you were screaming at the top of your lungs for 20 minutes and it really was hurting my ears. Like we struggle with sometimes, and it's kind of just maybe for us that are raised old school, like we don't explain ourselves to kids. Well, how are they going to learn? Like we should explain. Kids need to know, like, hey, I was human, I had a moment, but baby, you were woo. And I need to step outside because mommy's not going to be able to talk to you calmly right now. And I need a
Yes.
moment. That's how you model those things. And
Yes.
so you have to be able to do that yourself in order to model for your child. And if not, how are you going to expect something from your kid that you can't do yourself?
Absolutely. And the other thing that I'd love for you to highlight, because we've also talked to parents about this too, is that a predictable schedule and structure at home is
Yes.
really important,
Yes.
which, decreases level of anxiety.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that too?
Yeah, I mean, and especially again, because we have our COVID lens. So we're just going to assume that me as a therapist and understanding that typically if a child's behavior has changed, something has changed in the environment. And again, it doesn't have to be this huge traumatic, thing, but also understanding that trauma is subjective, right? Like what you might see as like traumatic or a difficult situation, your child may see something differently. So first we need to honor the perceptions of our kids, and what might be there, even though we don't consider it to be reality. Oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. Kids remember. I've had kids be like, Miss April, I remember I was in this car accident when I was 2 years old, or Miss April, I remember I had to go to the doctor and they had to hold me down to get me shots. You think it may not have been impactful, but it might have been impactful for that kid. So, um, understanding that with this kind of COVID lens, that we have kids that have had these things that they've been exposed to, understanding that most kids are going to struggle and have these kind of issues. And again, it's not parents' fault. And it's really important for us to have that patience to model, and to also understand that they're just little they're just little us. Like we forget that kids are just little human beings, they're little versions of us, right? They have the same emotions, they have the same fears. And we just have to help them feel comfortable to be able to communicate those things and let them know that sometimes we don't know all the answers too. You might ask me a question today and I may not know the answer. And it's okay to say, you know what, I'm not quite sure, but here's a place that you could look and maybe get more information.
Absolutely. I love that so much. So we kind of highlighted this next question. We were talking about language and sensory concerns. We haven't really talked about sensory as much, but and that obviously those impact behavior at school and especially in very young children. So can you explain some different ways a child may communicate or not communicate these needs and sensitivities? What are we looking for specifically?
Yeah, so the Cliff Note version would be like I'm trying to think about all the senses, right? So like let's start with the eyes. If you have kids where maybe they aren't able to see things very clearly, or what my brain is, sometimes I short circuit because there's 90 things going in here trying to come out at the same time. Um, I want to bring it to school first. This, I guess, could go up underneath that first question you asked me about behavior. You have kids where we put this term on, they're elopers, right? And I want to look at this differently. If a kid is leaving from their environment, running from their environment, that's a trauma response. So there's something that's happening in that environment that is too triggering for them. So that can be sensory based or a trauma reaction. So, for example, with the eyes, sometimes the lights are too bright in the classroom. And sometimes kids don't have the language or they don't know that that's what's bothering them. So, I always tell parents or even like, therapists, sometimes we want to know the why. Well, why'd you do that? We don't like the answer. Sometimes the answer is because I wanted to, or I don't know. And we get frustrated. Sometimes kids don't know that I'm running because the lights are too much. They just know that their body is telling them, get out. This is not a safe place. Um, so lighting may be something that might be triggering. Or if they're running or leaving from environments, I would pay attention to what's going on in the environments. That's one thing.
Loud noises.
Loud noises, yes. So kids that maybe want to wear headphones, or my nephew had ear issues because of ear infections. And I remember when he was younger, he'd always say, music too loud, TT, too loud. Like that was our sign that, I'm bumping my music, we jamming. Tactile things, shirts. If they like to
Tags,
wear shirt,
labels,
yes, it's the tags. Yeah. So if they wear their clothes on inside out a lot or backwards, that could be maybe some
elastic.
yes.
Yeah.
They're avoiding. And again, some kids, and this is going to bring back to something you said earlier, Jackie, that I wanted to point out when we were talking about kids in classrooms. Please forgive me exactly what it was, but confidence and self-esteem. Sometimes kids, their behavior is linked to confidence and self-esteem. I don't feel smart. I don't feel like I can do this. Some kids would rather, again, overtly externalize, get in trouble, and get out of that class than to raise their hand and say, I don't understand this.
Right.
Same thing with the sensory thing. So I'm thinking about some like if they're avoiding certain things with zippers and kind of the fine motor type of things, that can be a sensory thing or a trauma development delay. I would also then talk about if there's certain textures of food.
We
There's
see
a
that a lot, where kids are very
yeah,
picky eaters with texture.
that's me. I don't that is cream based. Don't give me no Alfredo. I don't want ranch. I don't want any of like just the. I always say cream and milky base, get away from me. If it's made with a white sauce, I don't want it.
Even
If
ice cream? Will you eat ice cream?
I'll eat ice cream, but I don't do milk, so it has to be lactose, and it's only chocolate chip cookie dough. I am the world's pickiest eater, right? I got my own sensory thing, so
I
trust
like
me.
that. I
Oh,
like
with
that.
yeah. So as an adult, I've just learned some places I just don't eat and I'll just eat later because I don't want to be a food diva. But I'm like, people are always like, we'll take you to lunch. It's gonna be
I
too
like
many.
it. And a lot of
Yeah.
our kids are like that. They're very, very picky eaters.
We
And
get upset, right? Like,
yes,
oh, you need to, and again, I was raised in that day and age. You put food in front, you eat all the food that's in front of you. And if you
that's
don't
right.
eat,
Or you're
you're not
not eating.
hungry. If you don't eat it, you're not hungry. And so So it also, outside of avoiding certain foods, it could also be mixing certain foods. So I used to run a therapeutic preschool, and we would have kids that would like mix their corn and their milk. And I had this rule: if you eat it, I don't care what you mix, that's your food. And so that, but that would be a sign for us with the OT, like, hey, he's mixing his food and he really likes it. Like, can you, there might be some sensory things going on there.
I love that we address that. So I'm a parent and I really want to have a conversation with my child
Yeah,
about some of these behaviors and concerns.
yeah,
How am I going to word that? How am I going to do that? I
yeah.
feel terrible for him or her. I've got my own anxiety as a parent about
Mhm.
talking to my child about this.
Yeah.
Let's just stick with the earlier ages right now. How would you start that conversation with your child? Knowing that there's been some behavior concerns or some anxiety at school, how would you start that conversation?
Yeah, I think even though we're talking about young kids, I think of all ages, just the way that you word it, everything you said is what you need to share with your kid. It's modeling. Hey, I'm a little nervous. Mommy's not quite sure what I'm going to say or if it's the right thing, but I'm so worried about you because I noticed that you've been doing some things that aren't really like you. And I know that you are loving and caring. And I know that you want to do so much good for other people. I'm just kind of making up stuff. But I've been noticing, or Miss So and so has been telling me, you've been doing stuff that's not really like you. So I really want to talk with you. The thing is, though, this is where the play therapy comes from. Again, most kids don't have the language, especially those young kids. You sit down with a 5-year-old, they're not really able to say, well, you know what, when COVID happened, that really scared me. Right. And so as a result, I
Well,
kind of
all the adults were wearing
out.
masks and I didn't know what was being said, so I just ignored it.
Exactly. So if
Yeah.
I'm going to give you my real answer as a play therapist, that's the beauty of what play is. We in our field say that we understand that play is the way that kids communicate and that is their language. So if you want to talk to a child, you need to talk their language with, which is play. So what that looks like is two different things. Well, one thing kind of broken into another thing. There's something called special time, and studies have shown that if you spend 5 minutes of special time with your kids every day, regardless of their behavior, if they got suspended that day, they had a tantrum that day, whatever, you do 5 minutes of special time. During that special time, your child gets to pick whatever it is that they want to play, and they lead the play. I don't come in and say, oh, you know what? I want to color this picture. Let's do this. No, if they want to play, and it's probably the thing you hate the most, because that's kids, Roblox, not Roblox, Minecraft. Can't say Minecraft. Now I expanded to like, tech things too, because a lot of our kids are tech based. But anyways, 5 minutes special time, one-on-one, put your phone up. A lot of parents hear that and they hear every day. And they're like, I can't do it every day. And you spend at least 5 minutes checking your email or 5 minutes going on, an app. We can give 5 minutes to just stop undivided attention. Notice that I said, regardless of the kid's behavior, this is really good for our younger kids, going back to the question about, them being a little bit maybe more clingy. Um, Kids need to then learn that my parent is going to be here no matter what. So this would be good if you, kids learn that even though I had a bad day, my parent still loves me, even though they're a little frustrated. So then also then kids are, the second part of it is kids naturally play out. They're in their ego stage, they're egotistical, they're narcissistic. So they play out what they're going through. So that is the most effective way, I believe, especially for young kids. If you're wanting to support them or figure out what's going on with them, sitting down with them and talking isn't going to be as effective as letting them have a piece of paper and draw and color, because they're naturally going to draw and color what's going on with them.
Love that. It also just opens the dialogue, even for the young kids and the older kids. And I love the fact that
Yeah.
you're kind of starting with being that human and saying you're causing me, and I'm anxious right now and I'm really worried and I've got this little pit in my stomach because I'm so worried about you, and I really want to understand, because that's not like you. You are loving and you are so gracious and you are thankful for what you have, and thankful to go to school every day. I love that the way that you just made that into a dialogue that can help all of us actually as educators and and as parents, be able to talk
Yeah.
to the kids. So
Yeah.
I
So
love
I'm
that
really
so much.
busy because you asked me a question and I went into such a long tangent that I didn't answer your question about schedules.
Oh, good.
I'm
Okay.
human, right? Right. I'm so
All
excited
good.
to talk to you guys, right? Okay, let me give you a short answer with the scheduling. Scheduling and consistency is important for kids. Like you said, they need routine. And that's why COVID was so disrupting because there was no predictability. Um, and understanding, again, coming from this trauma standpoint, working at my therapeutic preschool, one thing, and we would always say is like, don't move the room around. Kids need to have consistency. They need to know no matter
Mm.
what, when they come here, that's going to be there. So it gives them, especially younger kids, predictability, which lowers anxiety. Kids know what it sets expectations. Kids do better if they know what's expected of them. So for our younger kids, or maybe even our kiddos with ADHD, we do something called visual schedules. And so you can create, a calendar that shows like, okay, on this date is because they maybe are asking you when's gymnastics, when's soccer, and you could just like, it's good for parents too, because you can just redirect them and it lowers the,
Yeah, you
we
have a
have an
field trip tomorrow at school. Yeah.
exactly. For those younger kids, right, using pictures and letting them putting maybe Velcro things with it so they can move it. Maybe they have a little special picture of themselves. And putting them like, oh, okay, it's on Monday. I like to use sleeps. We got 3 more sleeps. So move it over now. How many more sleeps do we have? Um, and then for kids that have ADHD, we also recommend those visual charts because with the schedules and things like that, even though it's consistent kiddos with ADHD because they're kind of all over the place. You notice me and my um sometimes parents then it's like we have the same routine and I have to keep referring you to. So routines are really important. And the way that you can then have those visual charts is taking pictures of the kid in each step of the routine. So
Mm.
for a morning routine, you wake up, you brush your teeth, you wash your face, you come eat breakfast, you go upstairs, get dressed, put your book bag on, front door. 6 or 7 steps. Take a picture of each step, have a nice little poster board, and then step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, another thing I like to add on there is I believe in kids earning, right? So sometimes we just give kids a tablet, then we wonder why, then we're upset because we can't get it out of their hands and all that stuff. So I like to kind of put some like a duration. So for each step is 10 minutes of tablet time. And if you complete all the steps without having to come and ask me, then you've already earned 60 minutes on the tablet. If you skip a step, or like, let's say they're on the tablet and they don't want to get off, oh, well, you know what? If you want more time, what do you need to do to make sure that you get that time? It puts responsibility back onto the kids
On
as well.
them.
Yeah,
So they're
yeah,
accountable.
accountable. Yeah.
It, I love that. And I love that same structure that you were just talking about for when you get home. You
Mhm.
go get a snack, you go, right? You
Yep.
do
And
these 3
bedtime.
things, then we do homework, then you get tablet time or something of that nature. We hear a
Yep.
lot about issues with homework.
Mhm.
We hear a lot about children who literally behaviorally hold it together all day and then have outbursts when they come home. Can you address that a little bit for us? And that just came out of the blue. It's not written down anywhere. I just
Uh,
thinking about this parent I was just talking to about this similar issue.
yeah, you're not gonna like my answer, parents, but the thing is a lot of times kids hold their worst behaviors for the safest people that can hold that.
Hmm.
It's not that the teachers aren't safe, but sometimes it's like I know that my mom can handle this, or at least I think that my mom can handle this, and I trust her with this side of me, right? So one, maybe see it as like a a positive that your kid trusts you with that, right? Because like going back to the other question when you asked about like talking to your kid, I also tell kids you don't have to talk to me, but talk to someone. So that communicates that like I may not always be the person that you feel the most comfortable saying these things to, but that you can talk to someone else. So then when you think about these behaviors, it's like, no, they feel comfortable because they know that mom's going to be there. They know mom's not going to hurt me. They know that mom's not going to toss me to the side. Whereas if I do this at school, maybe I'm going to get kicked out or I can't go on a field trip or things like that. But then also kids are just savvy. They do different, kids are different with different adults. I would, with those children, it's all about just figuring out what the root is, because the root can be a lot of things, right?
What about safe spaces at home? Like, is there a space that they, and I'm asking because this is not my expertise, but like there's a space in your home that's got a weighted blanket or that is dark and calm, and you give them a choice when they're having that behavior. Okay, your choices are you can go to your safe space or another option, not sure, or go have a snack or something of that nature. Do you find that to be helpful?
Yeah, so we call them calm down corners.
Okay.
And um everyone's financial ability is different. I've had people where, you might be in a 2-bedroom and have several people in the home, so you can't really have like a designated room, but maybe a corner or a box of stuff. So we'll talk about that in just a second. And then I've had people, I actually, the kid that just now started liking me, his mom bought this really beautiful like tree house for the backyard. Now, also not only just being born during COVID, his dad died of cancer when he was like 4 months old. So there's another ACE, right? And she was like, April, I don't know if I should buy this. It's a lot of money. And I was like, listen, kids need a place to be able to like go and retreat, like that's their safe space. And this is something that can grow with him. So I've had people that had the means to have a tree house or something like that. So to first answer your question, yes, some type of space where kids can just let it out. So it can be a corner or a room, like you talked about. You want maybe calming music, or we always are thinking about the senses, right? So something that they can hear that's calming for them. Something that maybe they can, sometimes when people are overwhelmed, like eating a chewing gum or having a sip of water is something that is helpful. Something that they can touch. So the weighted blanket, or as I'm talking to you, I have a koosh ball in my hand. It's just my tactile. I have a whole little box of fidgets that
Oh,
I
I
keep.
have fidget toys.
Yeah, there
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
go. And so things that they can touch, or some kids are more, again, externalizing. I do kickboxing. That's my way of getting stuff out.
Oh.
And so it could be and I know what you guys are already going to think when I say this. It can be like tearing up newspaper, if we still get newspapers, but tearing up paper. Adults always worry about kids tearing stuff up because they're not going to throw it away. What's really important is to know the areas of our brain. When kids are dysregulated, they're in their brainstem. And the frontal lobe is where we possess our ability to regulate and to think logically, and where all those coping skills of taking deep breaths and things like that, right? So for my
Yes.
parents, I want you to think about when you lose your cool, like, right? Like I always say I wasn't operating at my higher self, or I knew better, or I just reacted. That happens with our kids as well too. They're in a part of their brain that they can't rationalize, they can't take deep breathing, they're just dysregulated. And oftentimes these sensory based things can be something that can help get them back into their frontal lobe. And when they're in their frontal lobe, they're going to clean up because you can make it a game. Like I put my hands over a trash can and see how many you can get in the trash can, like in 30 seconds or something like
Oh, I
that.
love that.
Another thing I've done is an activity called anger pillow. So taking a pillowcase, have them decorate it however they want, and then it's their special pillow that when they need to get it out, they can just go to town on that pillow as much as they need to. And that's just their special pillow. As long as they're not hurting themselves or someone else, it's a way that they can get it out.
That
Um,
is a fabulous idea. I like that idea a lot because that brings
thank
out the
you.
creative,
Mhm.
and you can help them with that creation, but that's their special pillow.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing I just want to drive home, last thing is visual, right? So like whether it is something I like to use on YouTube, there's like a calming fish tank, or if you have a fish tank, or think about lava lamps or things like that, something that's calming visually. Like I just like to look at the clouds. I'm just an interesting person, or I can just stare at the ocean. But something that's calming. And these are things that parents, you want to ask your kids when they are regulated, when our frontal lobe. And then you can either have it in the corner or you can have a box that has the prompts in it, right? So if chewing gum is on one of their kind of calm down lists, then we'd have the gum already in the container. Taking a drink, we have some water in there. Listen to music, put their AirPods in there. It becomes something, a visual reminder that can be helpful to get them from their brainstem to their frontal lobe to help them support themselves. The final piece I want to say in that is respecting everybody's way of like releasing, again, as long as it doesn't harm people. Again, if kids kind of are more need to get it out, externalizing, that doesn't mean forever we're teaching them when you're angry, you hit something. It's so we can get to the root of what the issue is. This is a healthy way to redirect it. Or put them in boxing and karate. That helps too, especially with like impulsivity and not and following directions. But I say this to say, like, sometimes when kids get upset, we want to force them to talk when we want them to talk. Like, for example, I'm a person and I would have some kids I worked with this that I respected in them. When I'm upset, leave me alone. Let me retreat. Don't say anything to me. Don't touch me, because then that just gets me even more dysregulated. But if you just let me go, leave me alone, I will come back. And when I'm ready, and either I will talk because I'm good now, or I will let you know I'm not ready to have the conversation yet, but we're good. And
And that's
so,
where we want our kids to get to. You just self-advocated for yourself. Do you realize that?
yeah,
That's where we want our students to get to, is that I learn better when
yeah.
I am able to do more if I have or need
Mm-hmm.
that this is originally all circles back to, we want them to be able to self-advocate
Yeah.
those emotions and needs so they can actually thrive and be successful. Love that you said that. That's a good example of what
Thank
you
you.
were just talking about.
Yeah, so parents, if you model that for as well too, right? And respecting your kid, I'm gonna respect, because sometimes kids can get real, okay, I'm gonna respect that you need some time alone because you tripping right now. I'm gonna be over here and you can come over when you're ready and then we'll talk about it. And it's still like, again, I ran a therapeutic preschool. I would have kids spit in my face, hitting me, things like that. And they would be in their brainstem, right? I would tell them, I know the difference between when you're in your brainstem and when you know what you're doing. And they would come back to me when they were back to in their frontal lobe and they were back to just regular sweet little Jackie. And they would come apologize. And I'd say, thank you for apologizing. I know that wasn't really you. We got to find a better way, but I appreciate it. So that goes to the other thing of parents learn to let it go. Let it go.
Learn to let it go.
We hold on to it. These are children and they're going to make mistakes. They're going to be impulsive. They're going to do things where you can be like, what were you thinking? It's our job to teach them. And when you think about it, you learn by making mistakes. Most people that win games don't go back unless they're like a Kobe Bryant, right? And see what they did wrong. They're like, I won, I'm the greatest, right? Like, but when we mess up or when we're learning or when we don't win, that's when we like, oh, I made a mistake. How can I be better? So
That's
we have.
how we create grit in our kid in our youngsters, is creating that grit, utilizing the failure
Mhm.
to not repeat that failure or that
Yeah.
issue that you are having.
Yeah.
This all goes full circle. I love everything that you're saying, and I think it's going to be so impactful. I do
Good.
want to highlight what you were just saying, which is about, let's go back. So you're talking about play therapy, which is
Mhm.
really a fascinating topic. It's not part of what we do at LASE specialized education, but we do have resources out there that do play therapy. Can you
Yeah.
just give us a kind of one-on-one of what that looks like in your
Yeah.
world?
Yeah, so it looks different for different ages. So we'll just talk about younger kids and then maybe teens and adolescents because it looks
Okay.
different. So play therapy is exactly what it sounds like. It's using play in our therapy sessions to help kids. And again, we're speaking their language. So play includes different types of like playing with different toys, but it can be puzzles, puppets, sand tray, art, music, games, and also can be like mindfulness-based things. Like I've done yoga and sessions with kids. And so with younger kids, it typically is more of that extended when we're talking about special time. Younger kids, again, oftentimes don't have the cognitive ability to sit down and say, I'm doing this because of this. And so most of us that work with younger kids, those, 3 to 6 year old kiddos, we do what's called child-centered play therapy, where we allow for the kid to come into the room and direct the play to play what they want to play with, however they want to within reason, again, as long as it doesn't hurt themselves or others. And then we're looking for the types of toys that they're playing with, the type of energy. There's these things called play themes. So for example, kids that, when they leave the room, there's toys all over the place. We would call that a chaos theme. And that lets us know that the child maybe has some anxiety. So
Oh,
the ways that kids are playing, we are trained to give us kind of clinical hunches what's going on, so it can be a good assessment tool for us, but it can be a good teaching tool. So most of our younger kids come in and they get to pick whatever they want. A standard playroom is going to have like kitchen set, food, baby dolls, puppets, costumes, cars, a magic wand, and we really encourage creativity. In those spaces, typically with younger kids, we're not coming in there with an agenda to teach them certain skills. It's understanding that play really is the healing source on its own, and we're holding a space where kids can maybe play out things in ways that they maybe aren't able to because of a multitude of reasons. They may not have the toys, they may not have the space, or they might be engaging in behaviors that are triggering for us as adults, right? For kiddos that maybe there are some sexualized concerns, if they're playing that out in their play and they're like taking clothes off of dolls and things like that, of course we're going to say, whoa, don't do that. Well, in the play space, we want you to do that because that's the only way you're going to be able to process that
and let us know what's going on, right?
yeah. That's
Okay.
younger kids, yeah. Then our older kids, my teens and tweens. So it's hard with this day and age because I've had like a 10-year-old come in and be disgusted that I even wanted them in the playroom, was like, I don't play with toys. I only play video games. So there's an element of the work that I do as a mental health professional in training people to understand that we might need to bring technology in certain ways into the space, because if we are being mindful of, and we're being inclusive, it's being mindful of different generations. These are digital based kids. Now, that doesn't mean that they come in and we have an iPad and we're on the iPad the entire time. If we're using digital things, it can look different ways. It can be, I have an online sand tray that they can do virtually. So that's what that means. Or like Sesame Street has a lot of really useful apps that teach different, like there's this Breathe, Think, Do app that they have for younger kids to help them about thinking through their problems and regulating. So if we're using more tech-based things in the space, it still is play-based and it has a specific reason of why we're doing that.
Okay.
But with the older kids, it's typically I'm using games, art, and music, and maybe some mindfulness. My teens love sand tray. I always do sand tray with my clients, my older clients, the first session, to explain to them like this is what play can be. I may not do it every single session, but the beautiful thing about sand tray therapy is, again, like play, things are coming out of the sand tray unconsciously that kids don't realize. So maybe a teen is telling them, saying like, oh my gosh, I have so many friends and I'm really, really popular. But then they do a sand tray and I tell them to do a sand tray that shows me their life. And they only have like 3 miniatures in there and there's no friends. That sand tray is telling me the truth of your reality, opposed to what you're trying to maybe tell me to impress me or whatever else. And I've had teens come after the first session and be like, well, that's not what I was expecting. I thought you were just going to sit here and ask me a bunch of questions, or that wasn't so bad. I didn't know that that's what we were going to do. The other thing, especially with games, and this goes back to the question of talking to your kids, with older kids as well too, finding ways to just connect with them and playing with them or being playful with them with no pressure to talk. A lot of the work that we do with play, there's no pressure. Going back to that question about where I said the change in behavior, the very first thing we were talking about, I had a kid that I was working with where I saw a change in the behavior, reached out to the caregivers. They said nothing changed in the environment. I was still working on my play therapy certification, still trying to buy into this theory that you're just you're paying me to play basketball with this kid and you're telling me I'm helping them and all I'm doing is playing basketball. And then one day he just shared what was going on, and I didn't have to ask him. He just shared it. So that goes back to this thing question. I get my best things coming from adolescents and teens, playing games with them and not even asking them any questions. A set of playing cards and Uno goes a long way. Where sometimes I've done sessions where we've played games and we haven't said a single thing to each other. And then maybe they next session they come in and they start telling me, Miss April, girl, let me tell you. And they start telling me all types of things. So removing the pressure also and just being connected. Kids again are just like us. We'll talk when we want to. Kids will talk when they want to too.
Absolutely,
So
when they build that trust. And
build
you
that
sitting and
trust.
playing with them and building that quality time builds that trust in their relationship. So they feel okay and confident to share those things with you. So we are almost out of time, but I did have one more question for you.
Yeah,
And
try
this
to
is
make
a
it
common
short.
one. It's a common one. We get this one all the time, but they
Yeah.
hear from us. I'm going to let you answer it. My child doesn't have friends at school.
Mm,
My child has a hard time making friends.
yeah.
What is your advice and counsel in regard? Because you know that breaks the parent's heart.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
hard thing to hear. What
Mhm.
kind of advice could you give that parent?
Yeah, you ended on a tough one. I was
I
getting ready.
know. I waited till the last one.
So one, I would see if I can observe them at school. I don't know if that's possible to maybe see what might be going on. A lot of times when kids, first of all, kids are just cruel. It's just a hard world out here, man. Let's just start there. Like, there's a multitude of reasons, and sometimes it may be connected to the child's behaviors, right? Like, um, sometimes our kids with ADHD have social issues because they
Or
struggle
on the
with.
autism spectrum.
Yes, because
Yeah.
when and you think about ADHD, so definitely for autism, because we recognize that social deficit kind of thing happening there, right?
Yes.
But we don't sometimes think of it the same with ADHD. And ADHD and autism are both considered like neurodivergent brain type of things. So um they're sisters, they're siblings. And so like with ADHD, that sometimes impairs relationships because man, they're always talking or they're always interrupting or they're always, so then kids start to pull away and the kid doesn't really realize. So first kind of figuring out like, is it related to like that, or is it like some mean click thingy bullying going on? Figuring that out first, seeing if you can observe, and
Or they don't
maybe.
know how to engage their peer, perhaps. They don't know how to ask a question. What do you like to play on in the playground? Or they don't engage with the other child. They're
Yeah,
already over there.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, yep. Mission social cues, don't know how to
Talk to your
socially connect.
teachers for sure.
Exactly. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm sure the parents that I'm talking to, because I have them in my head right now, see this at church, see this at soccer practice. They know that these relationships are really hard for the child because they don't like have friends. So
yeah,
I think just maybe just having a support system for them, and that there's a lot of kids who struggle with the same peer to peer
yeah, yeah. And I was going to
social
say,
engagement.
even as caregivers, if you can maybe create your own community, right, with other caregivers that you can, if you can find a parent buddy, and then you and your parent buddy are going out with the kids together and allow for them to form a natural
Ooh, I
friendship,
like that.
not force it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then what are some of the kids' interests? I'm big on, again, I'm raised old school. Kids need to be involved in things. I know accessibility and the way the cost of living is now, like it's a lot. And then as your kids in some things, as they get better, it costs more. That's a whole
Yes.
soapbox. But I say that also to what are some things that your kid enjoys and can we get them around? It's kind of just like college. Like I'm always telling teens, you're going to find your tribe in college because you're going to find people that are like-minded individuals. So if your kid is really into like taking stuff apart and putting them back together, is there a STEM camp that we can get them in that they can find people that are like them?
The
If they
Legos camp. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would say also tapping into and not forcing it again. What are some things that you naturally like? And then if we can get them
Mhm.
connected, with other kids that like those things, then those friendships could possibly naturally blossom more than like if you put them in Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, everyone has different interests, right? But if
Right.
I'm STEM class and you like taking this stuff apart and I like taking stuff apart, this can be a commonality between us where friendship can
That
form.
is a great idea.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. April, I always love talking to you. Anytime you want to have some facilitated discussion like this, we're all about it. We appreciate you impacting the parents that are going to be watching this. And we're so thankful and blessed to have you as part of our resources. We look at you to a resource, especially in the social emotional space. And thank you so much for taking the time today to do this. And
Yeah.
we wish you the best and many blessings to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And I'm sorry, y'all, I'm a talker and I hope I answered the
No,
question.
you did great. We
Okay.
absolutely love you. So I'm gonna
Love you.
say goodbye for now.
Okay.
And Happy New Year. I haven't seen you since last year, so I'm just gonna say Happy New Year and we will be talking soon.
Same to you. Thank
All
you.
right, well, thank you so much.